I scored a band 9 in IELTS reading 3 times. To get a high band score, you must know how to find the correct answers quickly. So you must have a reading strategy. And this is what I'm going to teach you in this video. We solve an IELTS reading practice test together step by step, and I show you how to find the correct answers really fast. If you're going to take your IELTS soon, check out my IELTS materials. There I teach you everything you need to score high. I show you step by step how to give high scoring answers, and of course we do many practice tests together, so you will feel confident for your test. You can find the link to the IELTS materials in the description box. And now let's get started. Now I will explain how to find the correct answers quickly. When you start your IELTS reading test, don't start reading the entire passage. Instead, go directly to the questions, figure out what the questions ask you to do, and then have a look at the passage and scan for the relevant information. This helps you find the correct answers really fast, and that's exactly what we're going to do now. We start with questions 27 to 30. First, let's take a look at the instructions. The instructions say, complete the chart below. Write one word or abbreviation from the passage for each answer. Write your answers in boxes 27 to 30 on your answer sheet. And here you can see the title. It says how HDI calculations are made. Now, let's take a look at this chart. If you take a look at question 27 here, you can see that it refers to these points here. So it must be a word or an abbreviation that describes what is going on in this row. So we are going to scan the passage for life expectancy at birth, expected years of schooling, and maybe GNI per capita. We will see whether this has anything to do with question number 27. Now, let's take a look at the passage. We're looking for life expectancy and expected years of schooling. Where can we find this? Paragraph 1. We start with paragraph 1. Paragraph 1 talks about the Human Development Index, HDI, and describes what this index is about. But there is nothing about life expectancy. Paragraph 2. I can't see anything about life expectancy here. Paragraph seems to describe how the HDI was created, and we're not interested in that. So let's check out paragraph 3. Here it says, long and healthy life. This seems interesting. What are we looking for? Life expectancy at birth and expected years of schooling. I can see the words life expectancy at birth here. So let's read this sentence more closely. While the HDI's 3 dimensions, long and healthy life, knowledge, and a decent standard of living, have remained consistent over time, only the first of these has been consistently informed by the same indicator, life expectancy at birth. And also, if you scan the paragraph, you can see the words expected and mean years of formal education here. So, let's read this sentence more closely. Today, the indicators used are expected and mean years of formal education. Now, let's again take a look at our chart. Our chart mentions life expectancy at birth and expected years of schooling. And here it says dimensions. So what are life expectancy at birth and expected years of schooling? How can we describe them with one word? Let's again take a look at the passage. You can see that it says has been consistently informed by the same indicator, life expectancy at birth. So life expectancy at birth is an indicator. And also here it says, today the indicators used are expected and mean years of formal education. So these are also indicators. So life expectancy at birth and expected and mean years of formal education, which is paraphrasing for expected years of schooling, are indicators. So I'm going to write down indicator here. By the way, you can write indicator or indicators, both is fine, because both words are mentioned in the passage and both words make sense. So this is completely fine. I'm going to write indicator. Let's continue with question number 28. This is the gap here. What is question 28 about? What does it refer to? Let's take a look at the context. So the words in front of and behind the gap. Here it says long and healthy life, and here it says a decent standard of living. So we are looking for these words in the passage. Where can we find long and healthy life and a decent standard of living? Can we find this anywhere? I can see it in paragraph 1. Here it says long and healthy life, and here it says a decent standard of living. So let's take a closer look at this sentence. Calculations are made using 3 dimensions: long and healthy life, knowledge, and a decent standard of living. And we should know what this is about. What are they talking about when they say calculations are made? Calculations for what? So let's take a look at the sentence before that. The Human Development Index, HDI, is a measurement tool used by the United Nations to calculate countries' relative levels of development. So the calculations they are making refer to countries' relative levels of development. Now we know what this is about. And they mentioned 3 dimensions here. And actually, the word dimensions is shown here. So dimensions refers to these 3 points here. And those 2 are mentioned in the passage, right? We found them. So what's the third one? The third one is knowledge. This is what it says here, knowledge. So I'm going to write down knowledge. We continue with question 29. Here it says something, years of schooling. So we're looking for years of schooling. Where can we find years of schooling in the passage? I remember that paragraph 3 talked about education. So let's take a closer look at this part here. We already had a look at that earlier. In earlier reports, knowledge was calculated by combining rates of adult literacy with enrollment rates in primary, secondary, and tertiary institutions. Today, the indicators used are expected and mean years of formal education. We can see the word expected in the chart, right? Here it says expected years of schooling. And here is an error that leads to education index. Does the paragraph talk about that? It doesn't talk about an education index, but it mentions something else. It says expected and mean years of formal education. So this is the only thing that makes sense to be entered here. So I'm going to write down mean years of schooling. We continue with question number 30. Here it says GNI per capita, and then comes the gap. This is an excellent keyword because it's an abbreviation, and abbreviations can be changed. So you should be able to find this word exactly like that in the passage if the passage talks about it, which is very likely. So let's take a look. Where can we find the word GNI? Can we see it somewhere here? I can see it here. Here it is. GNI per capita, which is mentioned exactly like that here. GNI per capita. So let's take a closer look at this sentence. Other scholars have criticized the use of PPP, purchasing price parity, to measure GNI per capita. So what does the gap say? GNI per capita, and then comes the gap. The sentence here says that PPP, which is the abbreviation for purchasing price parity, is used to measure GNI per capita. So this is what we're looking for, right? We're looking for PPP, and pay attention here. You can only enter one word or abbreviation. So you can't enter purchasing price parity because these are 3 words. And then the answer would be wrong. So what you have to enter is PPP. So I'm going to write down PPP here. That's it. We are done with questions 27 to 30. By the way, if you want more IELTS reading practice tests, hit the like button and write yes in the comments. If you want something else, tell me your video wish in the comments so I know what you would like to see on this channel. Now, let's continue solving this test. We continue with questions 31 to 36. Do the following statements agree with the information given in the reading passage 3? In boxes 31 to 36 on your answer sheet, write true if the statement agrees with the information, false if the statement contradicts the information, and not given if there is no information on this. We start with question 31. According to the HDI, a majority of European countries have very high human development. So we are looking for very high human development in the passage. Does the passage tell us anything about that? We start scanning paragraph 1. I can see the words here. Here it says very high human development. So let's read this sentence more closely. Northern European countries such as Norway dominate the top 10, although Hong Kong, Singapore and Australia are also found there. Currently, 69 of 193 nations are considered to have very high human development. Now, let's take a look at the sentence again. What does the statement say? It says that a majority of European countries have very high human development according to the HDI. Does the passage say that? The passage says that Northern European countries, such as Norway, dominate the top 10, and that 69 of 193 nations are considered to have very high human development. But the passage doesn't say that European countries, that a majority of European countries have very high human development. It doesn't talk about a majority of European countries. So we have no information about that in the passage. So we can't say whether the statement is true or false because the passage simply doesn't talk about it. And what's the correct answer if we can't find the information? The answer is not given. So I'm going to write down not given here. Next question. Before 2010, the HDI included data on how many adults could read and write. So we are looking for what happened before 2010 and what kind of data the HDI included. Did it include data on how many adults could read and write? Let's take a look at the passage. There is nothing in paragraph 2 about reading and writing. Here, paragraph 3, you may remember that one talked about the HDI's 3 dimensions, and there was something about education here. So let's check whether it says something about 2010, and yes, it does. Here it talks about pre-2010 reports, and this is what we are interested in because pre-2010 means before 2010. This is paraphrasing. So let's take a look. This sentence says, today indicators for the second and third dimensions differ from those used in pre-2010 reports. In earlier reports, so before 2010, knowledge was calculated by combining rates of adult literacy with enrollment rates in primary, secondary, and tertiary institutions. This is super interesting because the statement says that the HDI included data on how many adults could read and write. What does the passage say? It talks about adult literacy. Literacy means that one can read and write. This is paraphrasing. So now we know that this is correct. The correct answer is true because this agrees with the information given in the passage. Next question. In 2010, HDI data on standards of living began to be calculated in a new way. We're looking for 2010 because this is an excellent keyword and we want to know whether standards of living began to be calculated in a new way. Where does the passage talk about 2010? It's in paragraph 3. So let's take a look at the next sentence here. Similarly, prior to 2010, standard of living was calculated using GDP, gross domestic product, which measures the value of goods and services produced within a country. Today, so there seems to be a difference between prior to 2010 and today. It is calculated using GNI, gross national income, or the value of income earned by its citizens. So before 2010, prior to 2010, it was calculated using GDP, and today it's calculated using GNI. So there is obviously a difference. And what does the sentence say? In 2010, HDI data on standards of living began to be calculated in a new way. This is correct. This agrees with the information given in the passage. Next question. Angola's development score increases by over 40% when adjusted for inequality. So we are looking for 40% in the passage because this is a number, and if the passage talks about that, then it's likely that a number is mentioned exactly like that in the passage. And also we can look for Angola because a country's name can also not be changed, so it's an excellent keyword. So let's continue looking at the next paragraph. Here, I can see the word Angola here, and I can see 40% here as well. So let's take a closer look at this sentence. For example, oil-rich Angola receives an HDI score of 0.591, but an IHDI score of just 0.3, a drop of over 40%, since its wealthiest citizens are extremely wealthy, but its poorest extremely poor. What does our sentence say? Let's again take a look at the statement. It says Angola's development score increases by over 40% when adjusted for inequality. Is this an adjustment for inequality here? Is this what they mean by HDI score and IHDI score? Let's look for inequality in the paragraph here. I can see the word here. Let's take a look at this sentence. The second change to be made in 2010 was a modification of the HDI in order to take inequality into account. The original HDI is often described as the potential of a country to achieve particular goals, and the IHDI as what is being achieved in reality. So here you can see that the IHDI takes inequality into account because it's the inequality adjusted HDI. Now we know that the last sentence is crucial for our statement because the last sentence says that Angola receives an HDI score. The last sentence says that Angola receives an HDI score of about 0.5 and an AHDI score of about 0.3. So there is a drop of over 40% when the score is adjusted for inequality. And our statement says that the score increases by over 40% when adjusted for inequality. This contradicts the information in the passage. The passage says the opposite. So we write down false. This is the correct answer. Next question. One criticism of the IHDI is that it examines too few of the factors which may be important to development. So we're looking for IHDI in the passage. Where does the passage talk about it? We read about it here, and here it is mentioned again. IHDI or HDI. Criticisms remain of IHDI as a tool. And the paragraph says that in its current format, the tool does not take into account security, political freedom, access to the internet, real and perceived quality of life, environmental sustainability, and so on. What does the statement say? One criticism of the IHDI is that it examines too few of the factors which may be important to development. This is what the passage says, right? It says that the tool does not take into account several factors that are mentioned here that are also important. So the correct answer is true. Final question. The United Nations aims to improve its data collection in future reports. Where does the passage talk about the United Nations? Let's take a look at the passage. Where does it talk about the United Nations? I can see it here in the last paragraph. The last paragraph says, the United Nations acknowledges these weaknesses in the IHDI, noting that it simplifies and captures only part of what human development entails. And what does the statement say? It says the United Nations aims to improve its data collection in future reports. Does the paragraph talk about that? It only says that it also suggests that more recent HDRs have got better at setting data in their broader context. So they have improved at setting data, but it doesn't say that the United Nations aims to improve its data collection in future reports. This is not stated in the passage, and so the correct answer is not given. We are done with the true, false, not given questions. Amazing, great job. We continue with questions 37 to 40. Complete the summary below. Write no more than 2 words and or a number. This is super important. Don't write more than 2 words and or a number, otherwise the answer is wrong. From the passage for each answer, write your answers in boxes 37 to 40 on your answer sheet. Now let's take a look at the summary, and let's take a look at the first sentence that has a gap. Here it says, it was created by 2 Asian economists and has informed United Nations reports on human development since something. Now, what is this about? The Human Development Index, of course. And we want to know since when it has informed United Nations reports on human development. So let's take a look at the passage. We are looking for a year, very likely. I can see many years in paragraph 2. Let's check out paragraph 2. Does it tell us anything about when the HDI started to operate? The first number you can see is a year here, and this year is about someone who served as a finance minister of Pakistan. This is not interesting for our question because we want to know since when the HDI has informed United Nations reports on human development, and the United Nations are mentioned here. So let's take a closer look at this sentence. He was appointed special advisor to the United Nations in 1989 and produced his first Human Development Report, HDR, informed by the HDI in 1990. This is what we are looking for, right? Here it says, the first Human Development Report that was informed by the HDI was in 1990. So 1990 is the correct answer. Next question. The index suggests at present that, and then comes the gap, countries worldwide have achieved the highest level of development. So we very likely have to enter a number here, right? Because otherwise this doesn't make much sense. So something countries worldwide have achieved the highest level of development. How many countries worldwide have achieved the highest level of development? Let's take a look at this sentence here. Here it says, Northern European countries dominate the top 10 and so on. We've already read that. And then it says, currently 69 of 193 nations are considered to have very high human development. So 69, this is the number we are looking for. We need to enter 69. Next question. In 2010, the index was updated to include the impact of something on development. This was because countries like Angola, where wealth and well-being are, and then comes the next gap. We're not interested in that gap yet. So let's first take a look at this question here. The index was updated in 2010 to include the impact of what? I remember that there was something about inequality that was used to adjust the HDI. You may remember that. It said that in this paragraph, here it says, the second change to be made in 2010 was a modification of the HDI in order to take inequality into account. So inequality is the correct answer. We enter inequality. The index was updated to include the impact of inequality. And now we've already read the next sentence. We are looking for Angola in the passage because this is a country and so it's an excellent keyword where wealth and well-being are something. So Let's look for Angola. Where can we find it? I remember that it was somewhere here. Now, this sentence explains, we have already read the sentence, it explains that Angola receives a certain HDI score and a certain IHDI score. But this is not what we are interested in. We are interested in what happens with wealth and well-being in Angola. What are they? So let's take a look at the sentence before that, whether it tells us anything about Angola. In some countries, access to health, education, and higher incomes is unevenly distributed, meaning the picture painted by HDI data can be misleading. And then the passage gives an example. It says, for example, oil-rich Angola receives a certain HDI score and a certain IHDI score. So it gives Angola as an example. So this means that this sentence here applies to Angola. In some countries means, for example, in Angola. And what does it say here? It says wealth and well-being are something. What does the sentence here tell us? The sentence does talk about wealth and well-being. Well-being is health. This is paraphrasing. And wealth means higher incomes. This is paraphrasing too. And it says that they are what? They are unevenly distributed. This is what it says here. So we enter unevenly distributed. This is the correct answer. That's it. We're done with questions 37 to 40, and this means that we're done with this IELTS reading practice test. Amazing, great job! I hope you liked this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell icon so you're notified when the next video comes out. Also, share this video with your friends so they can improve their IELTS score too. See you in the next video!